right?
Okay, we're live. We're live.
Oh, we're live, live.
Yeah.
We didn't we didn't do any. You didn't give me a start time. I'm not recording on Audacity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Are we doing Audacity? I haven't done
Well, we
anything
don't
for
have to do
Audacity.
Audacity then. That's fine. We
Yeah.
won't do
We'll
Audacity then.
just do it off this. I honestly completely
All
spaced
right.
on that. But I don't
No,
have the
no
opener set
worries.
up, so I was like, you know what, whatever, let's just go.
All right. Well, hello. Welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
and today we're going to talk a little bit about Army of the Dead by Zach Snyder. But before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and we like to talk about movies, and we like to talk about TV, and we especially like to talk about my boy, my one true love, Zach Snyder. He has a new movie that came out this weekend, called Army of the Dead, which was a Netflix project. They hired him to make this movie. He wrote the script. He probably wrote the treatment, and then has like some sort of screenwriting credit. So this is actually a pretty heavy Zack Snyder film compared to some of the other ones, which obviously had different screenwriters or whatever else. It's a return to zombie form because the original, the big Zack Snyder movie that put him on the map was Dawn of the Dead, I think in 2003, which was written by James Gunn of Guardians of the Galaxy fame, actually. And I don't know, people have been talking about it, starring Dave Bautista and a bunch of other people that I don't recognize, but specifically Dave Bautista. It is a 2.5 hour epic of a movie. But yeah, so
That's one way to describe it. Yeah. So let's give, I guess, our pre-spoiler impressions. You go first since you're the Zack Snyder fan.
I enjoyed it quite a lot, but in a mediocre way for Zack Snyder, if that makes sense. I wasn't as insane about this as I get about specifically BVS and Man of Steel, both of which I think are very those are films that are thoughtful in a way that this one kind of isn't all that much. Or Watchmen was another good example. Those are my big three Snyder films. I don't think it's in that tier, but it reminds me a lot of kind of like 300. Even Zack Snyder's Justice League is sort of in this tier of just sort of it's not doing anything crazy. It's just kind of a fun ride to be on, and I just enjoyed my time with it. Part of it is just that this movie has a lot of things that I wanted from it, if that makes sense. Because I would otherwise think I kind of feel like the zombies are played out. They're uninteresting. I've thought this for years, to be honest. And I feel like if you were to attract me to a zombie movie, you have to do things differently, and Army of the Dead absolutely does things differently, and it's a kind of neat genre fusion between both a heist movie and a typical sort of zombie movie. And just everything in it worked because I don't know, I'm on the Zack Snyder wavelength, but I also recognize that a lot of people probably aren't, so that's where I live when it comes to this one.
Yeah. So I think this movie is a giant shitpost, and it gets a lot of points for that. A lot of entertainment points for that. It's very clearly exactly just a shitpost. And the worst parts are the parts where it stops trying to be a shitpost.
Right? Oh,
the
really?
big
Okay. I thought you were gonna say that, but sure.
I mean, the big downside of this movie is how straight they play the father-daughter thing, which is a thing that I think makes a lot of sense in context. I actually don't think it cuts too far against the camp aspects of it, right? Because camp, I think, can take itself seriously, at least in kind of the Adam West Batman sense, right? Of camp. But the parts of it that truly let me be on board with it are the shitpost parts, because otherwise, if you take it at its face and without the kind of not the kind of very clear intonation it's supposed to be a shitpost, it's a very bad movie. One that bothers me too much, right? I'm gonna go into a couple of nitpicks at some points, and I recognize they're nitpicks, and I also recognize that because this movie is a shitpost, I don't
nitpicks beyond, about the politics or the world building or the plot points, or what are the nitpicks?
The world,
okay.
There's a lot of so this is the very opening part of the movie, right? So it's not too much of a spoiler, and past this will go into spoilers, I guess. But like, and so this is like your semi-spoiler warning, I guess. Um, but the opening part of the movie is a military convoy is driving down the road, right? And dude's getting a blowjob from his like fiance or wife,
Roadhead, hell
and
yeah.
this car crashes into the military convoy, and the payload falls off the truck. The door just kind of opens, and that's how the primary zombie gets out, right? This is a shitpost of a movie. I don't care. Even in like a last shitposty movie, and then a very campy movie, I can let this go. Um, like, but like the idea that like this, you know, highly guarded truck could be derailed by a single car that just like normally crashes into it, right? Regardless of how it happens, it's just like so ludicrous on its face. I'm just like if this was trying to be a serious movie, I would dock it major points for that because that's like so
Sure,
unrealistic. Yeah. It would, and so and there's other things that like keep popping into my head as it happens, and I'm willing to like throw out because it's a shitpost of a movie, and because it's a campy movie, and it's not trying to be serious, right?
Yeah.
Even outside the more shit if we divide the shitpost parts from the just kind of like silly parts, right? Like this is like the silly parts. Let me exclude it as well. The shitpost is just the thing that makes it like attractive to me on top of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think that it definitely has those shitposty elements, but it is weird because it also has, maybe this is just like, this is part of the Zack Snyder thing, right? Because it also has a dead arrow straight performance from Dave Bautista, and his whole character and everything that happens with him is played absolutely straight. And he's kind of surrounded.
I don't think everything that does.
Really? Like what?
Let's do the spoil. This is
okay.
True spoiler warning.
Let's do true spoilers here. What are the parts in his? I felt like everything that was going on with him was played dead on.
So this is this thing I think is actually one of the best shitposts of the movie. Is there's this totally unearned like love moment between him and the female character who doesn't like get any screen time at all. But she's like,
okay.
What about us? And like they're like, we can make it work. And then she presses the button and the zombie immediately like murders her to death. Right? Like just straight up, she's gone. And I thought that was perfect because clearly it's it's a shitpost about how this is totally unearned, right? And like it's tragedy or whatever. But that's not like he plays into it, but like I don't think that's played straight.
Okay,
so
I do agree with you. I do agree with you, but I want to be clear. Dave Bautista plays that moment straight. Dave Bautista is not in on the joke, but I do think other characters in the movie are in on the joke. I think, honestly, a lot of the other characters in the movie are pretty like in on the joke.
I don't know how much I agree with that. I think most of them aren't.
Really? I feel like basically everyone else in the heist, except for him, his daughter, and this other woman, are all kind of mugging it up. Maybe the coyote also isn't quite, but the evil guy, absolutely. The black guy and the German, absolutely. No,
I don't think they're in on the joke. I just think they're like weird characters, right? Like they're hammy characters, but they're not like winking at the camera, which is what on the joke.
Okay, I guess yeah. Oh, that's fair. I don't really mean in on the joke in the sense that they're winking at the camera. I just think that like they are playing these, kind of comedy caricatures, like out there caricatures, rather than playing like like Dave Bautista is treating this with the gravity of Shakespeare, which, by the way, I would argue that is a good thing. I think a very similar thing to this movie is the Fast and the Furious franchise. The thing that Dave Bautista is doing here is extremely similar to the thing that Vin Diesel does in the Fast and the Furious movies. And part of what makes those movies work is that Vin Diesel is trying to convince you that he is Laurence Olivier, while everyone else in the movie understands that they are driving cars as if they were superheroes in an episode of Power Rangers, and that's the kind of mode that we're in.
You that Bautista is the straight man in this movie, and that's part of what makes it work. I'll give you that. Okay, that makes sense.
And I just loved every minute of it, including the part at the at the very end where his daughter has to shoot him in the face. Simultaneously, I was kind of. It was almost like a weird ambivalence because I was enjoying both, like I was emotionally connected to sort of his stuff, I guess, as at the same time that I was just kind of thrilled by the over-the-top nature of it, if that makes sense. Like, the fact that they have this gigantic... the climax of the movie is a fist fight between him and the king zombie in a helicopter that is outracing a nuclear explosion, right? Like, those words are not... That is insanely over the top, right? But like I was in it for that action at the same time that I was also kind of in it for this character drama, if that makes sense, between him and his daughter. And maybe there's something to the juxtaposition that makes it work. I just have no idea. It is the same feeling I get when Vin Diesel says it's about family or whatever, right? And I agree. It is about family, and I earnestly care about how much Vin Diesel cares about his family. I earnestly care about how much Dave Bautista cares about his daughter, even though he just slow motion shot the zombie king in the face with a pistol, and his head slow motion split in half, like peeling a fruit by the foot from its wrapper. You know, like.
Yeah, no, like. I'm definitely with you on that second part. I'm not so much with you on the serious parts.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I just think it, like, even in the Fast and the Furious, right? Like, there are characters that are less kind of like, there are comic relief characters, right? Like in the latest trailer, they're the ones that are like, like, yo, we in a rocket or whatever, right? Like, they're like the R2D2 and the C3PO, right? Like,
you are referring, of course, to Tej and Roman, because I, of course, know these character names. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
That is.
I was going to say, we were discussing before the show what series we have to catch up on to like do more episodes, and
the Fast and the Furious is a good one because F9 comes out in like a couple of days, right? Yeah. It comes out soon, I think.
Is it that soon? Jeez.
I don't even know.
I just know that my local cinema is doing free Fast Fridays to get people back in the theaters again, but they're showing the old movies.
No way. That's anyway, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, it is actually quite a while from now. It is a month from now, June 25th.
Okay. So we got some time. Buddy.
Yeah.
But sorry. I lost. You put me off my train of thought.
Yeah, I apologize.
It's fine. No. It's fine. Like, I feel like there's less of a bridge because there's like a bunch of characters in that cast that are more and less serious, right? Like, there are people that are all the way on the goofy, and I feel.
I see what you're saying. There's like a spectrum. Sure.
Yeah, and most of these characters are much more towards the goofy side, and there's like very little in the middle of like. Bridge characters, I guess I'd call them, right? Like the Coyote maybe fits, right? But like everybody else is like,
really like mugging it up.
Yeah. But yeah, no, but like there are great moments, right? Like you're talking about like this alpha zombie. The thing to me that like had me near rolling was like when the guy comes out with a cape and a mask and a spear, and it's very clearly a Spartan from the movie 300. And then, like, spears this woman, and then the follow-up is like, is that a zombie with a cape? It's just like Shitpost, right? Like, there was another great Shitpost moment too. Like, they're approaching the vault, and the guy with the buzzsaw is like, think about it. Maybe this is us caught in a time loop. Yeah, it's revealed like a big thing. It's like, that's not it at all.
Oh my god, I loved that moment. I loved that whole sequence of them getting the vault open. The part where the zombie gets smushed. Because, like, this is one of the shitposty aspects of the movie. The guy who hires them tells them that there's a bunch of non-lethal, like, things protecting the vault. And you later learn, like, the movie justifies this later, because they later say that it is not about any of this, that it's just about getting this one guy in so that he can get a zombie head, so that they can sell the zombie head on the black market so people can get zombie army or whatever. Like, that justification, fine, okay, whatever. But the thing is that they set it up in the beginning. There's like, there's a number of non-lethal countermeasures. So the first one goes, and there's a zombie, and he gets plugged by all these darts. Okay, haha, that's funny. It doesn't make any sense for the zombie. Then he gets shot by a bunch of guns, and the guy is like, I thought he said non-lethal. And then the zombie walks forward and gets smushed between like these giants. It's like an Indiana Jones trap. Who the fuck would put that in front of your vault, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But it's just like, Oh my god, I just laughed so hard, and I had such a good time. Honestly, the gore in this movie was spectacular. It was a spectacle, and I enjoyed every minute of just. I kind of forgot how gruesome. I don't know, because it's definitely there in Dawn of the Dead. It's also maybe there in Watchmen. There's a couple of parts in like Watchmen, but this is a brutally gross, gory movie. In like
Yeah.
the kind of grindhouse way that I just was like, this is sweet.
Yeah, I think this is. I think that aspect is more of the zombie movie heritage than it is the Zack Snyder heritage of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
Um, uh, but yeah, like was is there other stuff on the on the ship post level. Um,
The movie's
uh,
politics. The movie's politics, which, by the way, I've seen people go really back and forth about. I kind of think that I'm.
it's just ship post, right? I
Yeah,
don't
like
think it's meant to be serious in either way, right?
I kind of
Like
feel like it is anti-political more than it is like it is contemptuous of the idea that a movie has politics more
you
so
know what?
than it is like.
I think that's true. I think like the parts like I got like vibes like of like idiocracy. It's like the president thought it'd be really cool or whatever to
Yeah, and
launch
it's
the
really
nuclear bomb
deep
on.
if you would think about it. I was like, oh my god, how did they put that in this script? But it was great. That was a great moment.
Yeah.
That was the moment that really made it click, because at first I was like, I was sort of ruined for this because, I watched it on Sunday, but most people were watching on like Friday and Saturday. So I saw a whole bunch of Twitter discourse where, as always, the anti-Snyder people were like, "See, Zack Snyder is like a right-wing fascist. He thinks that if you get something like masks and vaccines, he's like, oh, if you don't get vaccinated, you're gonna get oppressed by the liberal government when everyone should be wearing, it's all about mask mandates or whatever." And I was like, I don't really know that it's about that. And then I saw people on the opposite end who were like, oh, Zack Snyder's like he's like all liberal now because he's so mad about, because like kids in cages with this quarantine thing or whatever. And I was just kind of like, oh. So I saw both of those takes. Then I watched the movies, and both of those takes are more or less accurate to the film, right? Like, the film is both readable in either of those directions, and I was like, what are we getting at
too,
here?
right? Because the thing that jumped out to me was like the anarcho-libertarian shitpost, where like Dave, it's like it's free in here, and it's like there's no rules in there. It's like, and Dave Bautista says, "Doesn't that mean it's more free?"
Yeah.
And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ.
But then when the movie did the thing with the president where he was like, it was the line of, it's really deep if you think about it. Actually, that's what really got me. I was like, oh yeah, this movie actually doesn't have politics.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you guys.
Well, no, like you said, it intentionally has anti-politics, right? Which arguably is a statement all on its own, right? Like it's like hard ironic detachment, right? Like sneering.
To be honest, this does make
at the
sense
discourse.
because I do know that Zack Snyder gets mostly affiliated with right wing people because he likes Ayn Rand, and it's always hard to like decipher this kind of shit. But the thing he likes about Ayn Rand is not really political as much as it is sort of like procedural, if that makes sense. Like, he talks about the Fountainhead as a story about how hard it is for like an artist to build something truly great, right? And about how it's about like the journey that someone has to undergo and how hard they have to work in order to sort of like realize greatness, which I understand. Like, obviously the Fountainhead is a very political book, but that is sort of the least political reading you can get. But he gets a lot of flack for people who really hate Ayn Rand and hate, and think of it purely in these sorts of political terms in that sort of way. And he was pretty vocally like anti-Trump and stuff like that, but like people just sort of ignored that aspect of it. And so I have a feeling that that probably comes from a place of sort of like frustration at the world, you know what I mean, like at like the greater world we live in that is politicizing all these kinds of things. Like you can't really engage with something on an like anti-political level, which I would theoretically make an argument against. Like I want to say, if somebody were to say not everything has to be about politics, I would say shut the fuck up, you're wrong. But the truth is, I think that that viewpoint is like kind of correct, and I get it where he's kind of coming from in this specific movie.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a deeper conversation about that at some point if you want. But I don't know if it's rightly placed here. But I get your point.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty fully accurate. Um, yeah, yeah. No, I think it's I think it's one of the funner parts of the movie too. Just kind of like that backdrop, right? Like they're kind of like sneering at the whole structure thing too, right?
Mm.
Like there's definitely a structure to it, but like there was an entire character who lives and dies in the intro title sequence. Who's great. That's the mother that finds her kid and like
Oh my god,
ends
it's
up
so
getting
tragic.
smushed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also very stupid. So what like if this was a serious movie, again, one of my criticisms would be like no one seems very concerned about actually saving anybody who's about to die. Right? Like I think this is most clear where like the YouTuber's girlfriend or whatever like jumps through the window and is clearly still fine and like no one does anything to help her, just like lets her, just until she's like overwhelmed, like they shoot the thing. This happens a bunch of times, right? Like I said, the moment where the female character gets her neck snapped, it's like right then, but like Dave Bautista doesn't Scott Ward, I guess his name, doesn't make any attempt to save her. The YouTuber like is like, come on, man, let's go, and then just kind of gets overwhelmed while Dave Bautista is like cinematically slow motiony, shooting things. And I think this is again the shitpost nature of it. But like there's just like no one tries very hard to stop anybody from getting killed, except
Yeah.
for Titor at the very end.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Their kind of bromance is maybe another piece that I would say is not shitposty. Like I do get that they, like they're funnier characters on like the comic relief end, but that moment was honestly maybe even more sort of like heartfelt than Dave Bautista and his daughter, where he, this is when the German safecracker gets Van, the guy, like the other guy who's been with him this whole time, pushes him into the safe and then closes the safe door so that he can't get killed by the Zombie King. I was like, like it's a small thing, but I did kind of connect to that, moment in the same way that I kind of would maybe connect to like the peril that R2D2 and C3PO get into, you know what I mean, in like a Star Wars movie, because they are kind of like likable and relatable. It's easy to get on their side when it comes to this. Also, I just appreciate how much of a threat this movie kind of made the zombies in a
yeah.
I've talked about stakes before. Like one of the things I really love about Man of Steel is that it's a movie that has a very good conception of stakes, and it gets me wrapped up in sort of the danger of everything that's going on. Like I believe that Superman in that movie is trying his hardest to keep Zod from genocide, from committing untold acts of horrific carnage, right? And in that same way, I believe that this group of people are trying their very, very hardest to survive in this like wasteland of very dangerous zombies. Like one of the things that the movie does is sort of eschew the basic, they call them shamblers, right? Like the basic slow moving, not smart, not agile, kind of like zombie that I think other zombie stories fetishize. And Zack Snyder got a lot of flack for this in Dawn of the Dead, because Dawn of the Dead also has fast zombies that are like agile and will chase you down, sort of thing. But I think fast zombies are sweet. I think that they make for cool drama, and I like a world where it is not about like having average people rise to the occasion against these sort of middling stakes, right? Like The Walking Dead is sort of like this. It's a bunch of normal people who get good at shooting guns in order to, survive in like the zombie hordes, but the zombies themselves aren't individually all that dangerous, right? Army of the Dead is like, no, these guys are very effective. They are built, They are well trained. They know how to shoot guns and use explosives, and they are like smart and capable and coordinated. And it is still tough for them to get through this alive. Like that's part of the new zombie thing that I appreciate. Like that was something
Yeah,
that new that I wanted to see from this movie.
yeah, and it's also like it's a different thing, right? Like
Yeah,
it's a different type of like horror too, right? Like like the horror of a traditional zombie movie is like how long can you keep back the ocean,
yeah.
right? Like this is funny. I was at the beach a couple weeks ago, and I saw this thing that boys always do is they dig a hole in the water, or dig a hole in the sand by the water and see how long they can keep the ocean from knocking over their sandcastle,
Yes,
essentially, right?
absolutely.
Um, right. So, and that is essentially what a zombie movie is, right? Like a much more horrifying version, obviously, but like the idea is the tide of zombies is unending, and you won't be able to. You will eventually fall. It's just a matter of like putting it off for as long as possible. Either putting it off um, until rescue comes, or just surviving as long as you can. And that is the horror, that it's endless, and it's not very difficult, but you will eventually succumb to the tide. Um, and this movie obviously is not poised to have that problem, right? Like the problem's contained, right? Like this is a totally optional thing they are doing for what is essentially greed,
Yeah.
right? Like, um, and so you need the threat there, right? The interesting thing there to me was that the Shamblers were theoretically there, and it's kind of like an unfired Chekhov's gun.
I
Where
also
it's
thought
like
that. I was
if they
so
get
sure that it because they mentioned how the Shamblers dried out in the sun, right? But if it rained, they would all wake up again. And I was like, ho, 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 I bet it's raining in the third act or something, kind of along those lines. My thought at the time, because this is sort of how nuclear fallout can work sometimes, is like it would force condensation, like maybe the nuke misses or something weird like that, and it forced condensation over Las Vegas, which is normally a desert, and so all of the Shamblers wake up and they're making their escape. But that never materialized. They just are completely. That was just not
yeah, it was an
delivered
unfired
upon.
Chekhov's gun, like I said.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, no, it's definitely a good way to take it. Like, but I will say that like Zack Snyder's the only person who could take a 2.5 hour movie and still not have enough time to tell all the stories he needs to tell, right? Like there was so
Yeah.
much like interesting little world building here that's like from the intro part to the to the other different pieces of it as well. But like the whole thing about like the king and his queen, and the queen was evidently pregnant, and like he pulls like the fetus zombie out of it. It's like that's like interesting stuff, but it's got like 5 minutes of screen time, right? Like
Yeah.
the whole zombie like society aspect of it, like
I do think that is something that because I'm pretty sure they greenlit a prequel to this or some sort of sequel to this. I don't know. I saw some rumblings about how this is starting a franchise, and I agree. I'm actually very interested in the mechanics of this world, and I think it is interesting to sort of start it off at this end point because theoretically the nuke goes off and like the zombie threat is contained. I mean, there is sort of the after credits ish stinger of the one of the
man
guys,
is
yeah,
bit.
he's bitten, but he's getting out. But that's like a different sort of thing because he's not an alpha zombie or whatever, like the Zombie King was. Like I sort of want to know what ended up happening that the Zombie King existed and was in like custody in the first place, right? Because like the movie side sort of begins with that as a presupposition. And my understanding is maybe that'll be a whole thing.
Yeah, no, my read of that is that he's like a military experiment, right? Because I think in that first scene he's got like military pants on,
Oh,
um,
interesting. Yeah, I mean,
and
one of
he's
my
being
favorite little details about the zombies is those alpha zombies sort of have this iridescent blue blood to them.
yeah.
When he pulls out the zombie baby, it's covered in this, right? But then also when he gets shot in the head, it's covered in this. And then so I don't think it was there for the shambling zombies, though. You couldn't really tell because it wasn't really like showing off that kind of level of gore. But for some of those alpha zombies, absolutely, they had this like blue ichor blood stuff. That was just like that's neat as like a little world building detail.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I like there like my thought immediately with the post where the ending scene was Van got bitten by the zombie king, so he will turn into an alpha presumably, right? like rapist cop did.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
or
He got bitten by the Zombie King? Are you
uh,
sure?
yeah, no, he gets bitten in the fight. In the fist fight he has with Zombie King, which is another
Oh,
shitpost
right.
moment,
Yeah.
by the way, right?
Yeah.
Like,
He has
right, like
to.
he throws down his gun and he pulls off his mask. It's
Oh
like,
my
oh, put
god.
off your dukes or whatever,
And then the Zombie
right?
King pulls off his mask too. This is my favorite part. I loved that there is a zombie smart enough to realize I can take any amount of damage, but I can't get shot in the head. So he makes a mask so he can't get a headshot. And then he takes the mask off so that he can 1v1 Van. And I was just like, this is my shit. Honestly, this movie had a bunch of 1v1s like that, and all of them were great. There was Dave Bautista versus the clearly breakdancing zombie who was like a
Yeah,
breakdancer in real life and was kind of like it was like strong guy versus fast guy. I was all about that. That was my shit. And then there was
yeah.
the zombie
I mean,
tiger. Also loved that. Uh, the
this
zombie
is another
tiger
one of
may
my.
have been my favorite, like 2 minutes in the movie, actually.
But I might agree with that. But this was another one of my like nitpicks is like a scrap metal helmet isn't going to stop a bullet, but this is again a thing I'm willing to forgive, but like a thing that immediately pops out of me is like that's not how that works. Like the inner nerd in me. But yeah, no, I there are a bunch of great one-on-ones and like the thing that was a little disappointing about that scene where the tiger kills the bad guy is there is no like the motivation of her pulling out the head to screw him is actually kind of inconsequential for him since he gets eaten by the tiger anyway, right? Like if he had the head in the bag, it wouldn't have made a difference, right?
Mm.
And again, not a big thing, just kind of like it's the kind of like natural flow of the story is important. But
Right,
I
but
agree with you.
why would that make a difference?
Um, I just kind of like from like a conciseness of narrative type thing, right? Like like the reason a Chekhov's gun is a rule is because you don't want to give the audience extra information, right? Like there's like no like it is inconsequential to the story that she switches out the head for the reasons that she switches out the head for, if that makes sense,
What
right?
what
It's
are
all
the I'm sorry.
happenstance. It's all luck.
What are the reasons that she switches out the
She
head?
presumably switches out the head to keep him from being able to deliver the head, right?
Okay.
He is prevented from delivering the head anyway by the tiger. It's not a big problem. It's just kind of like a small kind of like it's like a luck thing rather than like a story thing. If that makes it's this
I
is
guess I agree with that. Though I do enjoy the thing I enjoy about that was the planting and payoff where
mm,
he brags about tricking her twice. He's like, I got 2 times I got you, right? But she got him by switching the heads.
right,
And
right,
I enjoyed that moment. I thought that was sweet. Especially because it was well set up because like I remember she focuses on the thing and I was like, "What? I don't understand." And so it was a nice like, "Oh, I get it" kind of moment. I like the
okay,
coyote a lot, to be honest. She was probably
yeah,
my favorite maybe my favorite character. She's probably my
yeah,
favorite
no,
character, or Van, one of them.
yeah, no. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there weren't a lot. Like there wasn't like the coyote's one of the few characters that gets like real depth and like enough time for like her arc to make sense,
Yep.
essentially, right? Like like the Tito or Van arc like has points in it, but there's not like a lot of development there. It's just kind of like moment because like I said, Zack Snyder's the only person who can take a 2.5 hour film and not have enough time to do what he needs to do with it.
Yeah, they don't
Um,
really have an arc. They just sort of have a relationship. But the coyote pretty clearly has an arc, right? She kind of
yeah,
has
the
this
fear of this
guilt,
arc.
and she sort of fulfills her purpose, I guess, and like redeems herself in some small way.
Yeah, no. So just to jump back really quickly to the potential sequel bait, which is Van flying to Mexico City, right? Like the natural extension to me, right, is like, oh, so they kill Las Vegas, they could put it into if they do Mexico City, right? Like that's like you can make it a country level threat, right? But like talk about the political aspect of this. My immediate thought about a potential sequel is like, are they going to build the wall at the border to keep the zombies in, right?
To be
Like it's
honest,
like,
I would actually be very down for that. Have you ever read World War Z by
yes, I have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really loved that.
Max, whatever.
Yeah, it's what's his face's son, right? It's some famous guy. I'm trying to think. Who's the guy that makes the producers?
Uh,
Oh my god,
Bloom?
I'm so blank on his name. He works with Gene Kelly all the time. Mel Brooks. It's Max Brooks. Mel Brooks' son wrote a zombie
Oh,
novel called World War
I know.
Z, which is great and is completely unrealized because there was a film version of it made of it that was fucking garbage. Even though it made $1 billion because it starred Brad Pitt.
Yeah, well, the thing is World War Z, and like he also wrote the Zombie Survival Guide, right?
Oh, maybe I wouldn't know. I only read World War Z.
Uh, yeah, Zombie Survival Guide is, I think it predates World War Z, but like
Okay.
they're more kind of like the Zombie Survival Guide is like an in character, like it's like a Survivor Guide style book about a zombie apocalypse, played straight. Um, and like World War Z, if I remember correctly, maybe I only read the Zombie Survival Guide, but I think World War Z was kind of like more like a history than it was like a kind of like action flick, which is what the movie was, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the
So,
thing that made World War
um,
Z very cool is that it was in universe, kind of diegetically, a UN report of what happened during. I think
right,
they called it like the Z Wars, whatever. So it was actually told all in like the past via interviews with people, right? And this is how you get the cool stuff like Israel builds a wall. To keep like that's their thing. North Korea also solves the zombie crisis internally by removing the teeth of everyone in the nation. So even if they do turn, they can't bite and penetrate skin and pass on the virus or whatever. And there's all this like world building, like something, like one of the cool things is one of the interviewees is a Brazilian surgeon who does black market organ transplants, which is how the virus got out in the first place. Was these black market organ transplants that were like going on. I think that book is amazing and maybe one of like the poster childs for just like world building and lore as a major selling point of your thing, right? In the same way that like we talked about Bad Times at the El Royale is sort of this like the thing that makes that movie great is its plot. It has an amazingly fine-tuned plot that was just insanely fun to watch, right? To just like watch happen. And you could point to things that are like, oh, this was thematically really interesting, or like character, like it had these super interesting and deep characters, right? Like I would argue that something like like Game of Thrones, any of these prestige TV shows, The Sopranos, maybe Game of Thrones before the ending, Better Call Saul, a lot of these are built on like incredibly interesting and complicated characters. World War Z is just a set of really sweet lore and world building that I cry thinking about the film adaptation being as bad as it ended up being, which sucked because the original script was written by J. Michael Straczynski, who's a favorite writer of mine. But anyway, the promise of World War Z that was really sweet is it dealt with the zombie threat less in like a horror sense and more in sort of like a almost like a fantasy sense, right? Where you're tracking the movement of armies and the decision making of high level political leaders in the same way that, we watch the army of Gondor fight the army of orcs or something like that. And I've always thought that was like such a potent thing that you could deliver on, right? Like it's not just these individual people are hiding out in a mall, right? Or these individual people are hiding out in a prison, or whatever the small scale zombie story is. This is an action movie versus the zombies. And Army of the Dead kind of gets that in the sense that it has a lot of action movie elements, but it does also have a lot of those horror movie elements, and it has a lot of tension and suspense that I would say is more akin to horror than action tension and suspense. So an Army of the Dead 2 that just fully realizes what it would be like to deal with that kind of zombie threat. I think that's fucking sweet. I'm all on board for it.
yeah, no, this is interesting because like I think this is like the kind of new take for zombie movies, kind of in the modern age. Just like, well, actually, if the world brought its might to bear against the zombie threat, they'd be able to deal with it, and it wouldn't be the end of the world, right? Like, I think the first popular stab at this is Shaun of the Dead, right? Where like after it's the traditional following of the core people, but you get out the back end of it and everybody's fine, right? And like zombies are like game show curiosities, right?
I would actually
But
argue a little differently, but sure.
what would you argue then?
I think I would argue that Shaun of so I do think Shaun of the Dead kind of delivers on this promise or whatever, but I think the real
Well,
ones
it's
that
an
I would
early version of it.
yeah, there's almost sort of I guess I would say three of them because I guess I would agree that Shaun of the Dead is in there. I also think Warcraft 3 is in there because of how it treats sort of the Scourge and Arthas and like Lordaeron, right? Like Arthas' story of Lordaeron's fall is very true to form for like kind of a zombie movie or whatever. But it moves out of that pretty quickly and into sort of this, the Scourge is just one army of evil that these fantasy races otherwise have to, otherwise have to fight, right? The Horde or the Night Elves or whatever. And then the other one I was thinking of is 28 Days Later, which has also got that. Technically, it's 28 weeks later, which I didn't like as much, but 28 Days Later definitely has that sort of, like militarized flair to it, and the apocalypse is kind of contained and dealt with. Even though those aren't true zombies or whatever, right? Like these are living people who are just super rabid or whatever else. I feel like 28 Days Later has actually quite a lot in the zombie canon, like the modern zombie canon, to do with movies like Army of the Dead.
What was the? Well, I think we talked about a movie that was like the zombie. Like it's not I Am Legend, but there's one where like the family turns and it turns out they're like just a separate group of people. Like the zombies are like their own intelligent species, and then just leave them alone or whatever.
I Am Legend
Um,
does do that.
no, I know I Am Legend's the big famous one, but there's a smaller one that I'm thinking of that I like. It's like a family, and they're trying to escape the area, and at the very end, they realize that they could just kind of like walk out, and it's not a problem. But um,
Now I'm really interested.
uh, I don't know. You want to hang on
Zo-
for a while
zo-
while I see if
zo-
I can.
Zombie movies, right? Like looking it up. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think part of what makes Army of the Dead pretty interesting when it comes to sort of like the zombie canon is also the heist movie elements that it adopts. I think like it has a part of it because of the Zombie King and the different sort of threat that the zombies like represent. Compared to a more traditional, right? Like, really, I sort of feel like The Walking Dead is on one end, and then you have Army of the Dead kind of like on the other, where like The Walking Dead is the true trope, if that makes sense. It is sort of like the bedrock um, of what you would expect by a straightforward zombie movie, whereas Army of the Dead wants to turn everything on its head. It wants to make the zombies more dangerous. It wants to give them a kind of more complicated mythos. It wants to make that mythos sort of like in a wider world that is more complicated and interesting than just like the world falls to zombies, if that makes sense. But I think that the heist movie is really what puts it over the top because it gives the characters a reason for doing stuff that is not just survive, right? In a lot of zombie movies, that's just the goal, right? Like Dawn of the Dead is basically just how do we survive the movie, right? But in a world where the zombie threat is contained and where it's not, going to end you at any individual moment, or you don't have these sort of like post-apocalypse tropes that like The Walking Dead is sort of dealing with. You can sort of center the narrative around something else, like a plot device that that like requires that directs the story, I guess is what I'm saying. And keeps interesting things happening that leave the zombies sort of as a force of nature to be reckoned with, right? Do the hard thing while under the threat of the force of nature rather than anything else. Have I vamped for a long enough time? So have you figured it out?
I cannot figure out what this movie is. Uh, maybe it was this is
and
going
we
to give me.
reviewed it.
Maybe we didn't. Maybe I just talked about it in sequence. But like, I feel like it was like a what was it? I feel like it was like a streaming movie. Um,
Interesting.
like
I'm honestly looking at all these movies and I'm like, wow, man, there are a lot of fucking zombie movies.
maybe yeah, there's a lot of zombie movies. Uh, tell us in the chat if you've got an idea of what you think this fucking movie I'm talking about is.
Are
Um,
you sure it was a zombie movie? Maybe it was like a.
it might be like a bit. It was definitely like a
What
maybe
about The
like a pandemic
Mist
movie of sorts.
with Thomas Jane, The
I don't
Mist, where he shoots his whole family and then the army shows up immediately?
no
Okay.
no 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 no.
Man,
Uh,
that ending is brutal, by the way.
uh, zombies. Nice. Uh,
This is gonna kill. This is gonna kill us, isn't it?
it's
We're just gonna
yeah
spend the rest of this like googling different zombie movies until it finally clicks.
yeah. Do you have anything else about Zack Snyder's uh
I guess I will say that
stuff?
I mentioned earlier that I was disappointed, um, which is true. And I think the thing that disappointed me most is the sort of lost potential of it. In a certain sense, I sort of think this may be too much psychologizing, which I would normally eschew, but like I don't know, it's just too fun in this instance. The thing that I really enjoy about like Man of Steel BVS, right, is that it is like asking like these big complicated questions about, Watchmen, right? Like about sort of what is like heroism, what makes, like a man or a god or something kind of along those lines. And I think by and large people really balked at that version of Zack. Like they don't want Zack Snyder to make thematically interesting content, right? Partially because I guess I don't know. I get it, I got it, but they didn't. And so I have a feeling that he was just sort of like, man, I'm just gonna make an action movie. It's not gonna have any big crazy points. I'm not really gonna make any clear or complicated statement here. I'm not like wondering about like the mythic whatever of like what makes these like characters work or something like that. It just is what it is, and I'm sort of like moving on. One of the things that you know I feel like the I don't know, like the bedrock of Zack Snyder might be Excalibur, the 1981 movie, which is a King Arthur movie, which I think was actually one of Liam Neeson's first movies. But it's definitely like a big epic film about King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table. It does the whole sort of the death of Arthur kind of storyline and all of the like Arthurian literature and all that stuff. And it has this grandiose nature to it, and I miss that because Army of the Dead has pieces of it, but it doesn't have the like Zack Snyder's Justice League version pieces of it, or even like the 300 pieces of it. And like the 300 is a movie that I would also say doesn't really have, like I don't think that movie is really all that complicated in terms of like theming, and it doesn't have all these interesting questions. And I'm not going to write a fucking book about 300, but it does have that like epic feel that I sort of miss, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of movies these days just don't have like that kind of epicness to it, right? Like I was reminiscing on this recently. I was watching like another movie that I didn't think was particularly good, but had kind of like that feeling that maybe this is the thing that I think the Wachowskis are good at. Um, I think maybe it was Jupiter Ascending, which I think is a very not Jupiter Ascending because Jupiter Ascending is just bad, but the Cloud Atlas.
Oh,
Cloud
Cloud
Atlas
Atlas,
is a
yeah,
movie
sure.
that one that I think is very mediocre, like on like as a whole, but nails kind of like the epic feeling movie thing very well. This is a thing that I think also is very true of the Matrix movies that I just don't think like you get as much of anymore, right? Like this is like you what you go and you like there's like this very specific montage of like epic movie speeches that I think about, and a lot of those movies kind of have that kind of like epic feeling to them, right? Lord of the Rings falls into this category. I
Yeah.
just think that's not as popular anymore for whatever reason.
I mean, I think Lord
I
of the
think
Rings is the bedrock of the last 20 years of filmmaking, right? Like, if I look at what defines filmmaking for the 21st century, it's Lord of the Rings, right? It completely underlines. I mean, I think people might say the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point, but I don't know, man. Lord of the Rings is the thing that just seems so completely out there and it just completely changed the game.
yeah, so I agree with you on a lot of aspects with that, but I also think that like and I think this is part of the other bedrock of the last 20 years of filmmaking, which I think is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which took kind of like a lot of that epic stuff and like bathosed it to death,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel like a lot of kind of like that epic feeling has been undercut by like wanting it to be like funny and sarcastic in a lot of ways, because Lord of the Rings is like there are jokes in it, but it's like a played straight movie, whereas I don't think we've had a lot of that. Um, even
Yeah.
in the prestige space, a lot of it's focused on smaller stories, right? Like I wouldn't call it all quite mumblecore, but it's like trends in that direction. Um,
I get that for
it's been a
sure.
long
I mean,
time
like,
since,
think about the Hobbit movies, right? Like, the Hobbit movies are
yeah,
basically trying to catch lightning in the bottle for the Lord of the Rings movies. And I, by the way, love the Hobbit movies. Like, I've watched those movies. I watch those movies. I maybe have seen those movies more than I've seen Lord of the Rings, just because I find them to be a really, like, just like a good watch at the wrong. But those movies are not great. I the they're pretty bad in like real terms. And I wonder if people like kind of look at those movies and they just kind of go like, this is just like not something people can't go for that level of filmmaking anymore. I mean, Warcraft is sort of on a similar level. Like, I just feel like there are lots of like swings and misses when it comes to these high, like big epic uh stories. Maybe that stuff is all just TV at this point, right? Like Game of Thrones, um, you know, uh, anime and stuff like I don't know. I guess Star Wars is sort of like this. I definitely got that big epic feeling out of maybe The Last Jedi and Rogue One, but not really any of the others. I don't know.
yeah, no, I definitely get that. I definitely get that. I think you're right on that. That Rogue One
Really, Rogue
wants
One.
to try and capture the.
I do think it is there in The Last Jedi, but mostly just sort of as like the Jedi Sith stuff. Like most of The Last Jedi is pretty big, like it's pretty down to earth filmmaking. Whereas like The Force Awakens, for instance, I think is very down to earth filmmaking. Like The Force Awakens feels like it it plays in a universe of 25 people. Same thing with Rise of Skywalker, and also kind of Solo. Um,
Yeah, and
but
the
but like
Last Jedi, the Last Jedi wants, I think, to also to be a smaller story, right?
yeah.
Like it's a chase, right?
Yeah, but like
Um,
Rogue One really like, Rogue One makes you feel like the Empire really is this galaxy spanning,
yeah,
bureaucratic authoritarian engine, right? And then the rebellion, the Rebel Alliance is a legitimate alliance of, right, like planets and you know people in the I don't know. Like, there's something to that final base space battle in Rogue One that just makes it feel like it is happening on a bigger level than basically any of the other stuff. Um, in modern Star Wars, which to be honest is something that people praise about modern Star Wars. If we think about the appeal of like the Mandalorian, the appeal of the Mandalorian is precisely that, right? Like these sort of kind of contained episodic stories in like the wider, just sort of like in the wider playground of Star Wars compared to something like Rogue One, which is about these galactic titans facing off against each other.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah,
So I don't know. I think an Army of the Dead sequel that does sort of like do this thing, especially one of the nice things about the Army of the Dead that I also just really enjoyed is that it fucking killed its characters. I said this exact same thing about Rogue One. I just really
mm,
miss when there were body counts in these kinds of movies, right? Where just like it introduces you to a whole cast of people, and I mean, Army of the Dead kills basically everybody, but
everyone, yeah.
yeah, most of them are gonna die. Some of them are gonna die. I just like I don't know. I really miss that about stuff like it really makes things like Civil War feel like Care Bears in comparison, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah, their total hesitance to kill anybody, even semi-permanently, is it's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What else can we say about this movie?
What?
Did you
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
go on?
for it.
No, you go for it.
Okay. What did you think about the Tignatario subbing in via green screen for Chris D'Elia or whatever? But there was one guy, he got like Me Too'd in the middle of the movie, but they had already shot all of it, so they subbed in Tignatario as the helicopter pilot in post.
Oh, okay. That so I didn't realize that she was in post. Like I remember seeing Tignataro in the pre-roll, and I didn't even think I didn't even realize that it was her. I don't know. I don't know. Like it was noticeable to me, but I also didn't notice them scrubbing the mustache off of Henry Cavill's face. So I'm not great at spotting these kinds of things
That's fair.
if I'm not looking for it.
I definitely one
Um,
of the things that I think was very kind of clever in how they hit it is that this was a movie with very uh like fuzzy focus. Like when you shoot on a wide angle lens, everything is in focus, right? When you shoot on very tight lenses, everything is not in focus. And this is a movie where and which is obviously like a filmmaking technique that allows you to draw the eye because people are drawn to sharp images and sort of phase out, the like fuzzy images. And then you can also do like rack focus stuff where something in the back is in focus and then it changes. That's called a rack focus. I loved that about the movie, by the way. And it's one of those things that I didn't really realize was sort of like like everybody talks about slow motion and stuff as like these the signifiers of Zack Snyder's visual language, but the focus stuff was really I immediately got it, and it immediately reminded me of a lot of focus stuff that happens in some of his other movies. And I thought that really helped the Tignatario stuff, because the movie was already pretty, it had a good sense of like fuzzing people out in the background in some of the like the group shots, and things were pretty like tight, the cinematography. So I don't know, I thought it was pretty seamless. Though some of her line delivery was, you could tell, was like she was in a green screen and a PA was like, ba 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 ba, this is the line, and then she's reacting to the PA. She wasn't really reacting to the other person.
yeah, I mean I liked that character well enough. So what happened to the original actor? Like, what did the person? Was it
He's some
was it a man or a
comedian.
woman?
It's a guy. He's some comedian. He got Me Too'd really hard, so they dropped him. Hold on. Let me. I don't even know what Me Too'd really hard is. I have no idea. All I know is he got pulled off the thing because he got Me Too'd.
That makes sense. Whatever. It's not super
Oh
important,
yeah,
I guess.
five women detail Crystalia's alleged sexual whatever, sexual impropriety, all this other stuff. I actually like her quite a bit in this movie, and also for that role. One of my favorite moments that I laughed really hard at was she just immediately agrees. They show up, and they're like, hey, we got a mission. It's gonna be
Yeah.
whatever, $2 million. She's like, I'm in. They're like, what? She's like, it's $2 million. Fuck it. Oh man, my life sucks. I'm in. Like, that was super funny, and I really loved that moment.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, yeah. Um, I agree. It was really immediately endearing too, right? Also, like the part where she's like, I'm like the second most important, right? Like you gotta protect, like obviously the germ is the most important, but
That was pretty funny.
yeah,
To be honest, I actually
it
really
was,
liked the getting the team together montage, which some people have said is going out of style and not cool anymore and all this other stuff, and I think those people are wrong. The getting the team together montage is a hallmark of filmmaking for a reason. It's very fun, and this one was great. Like the YouTuber, like the streamer like thing with the guy and his girlfriend was like my favorite, and then his guy who was a total poser who was like, I can't do this, and he leaves. I thought that was awesome.
like you're gonna get killed, right? Like, for whatever reason, I thought that was gonna be a twist. It's like that he hadn't actually killed any zombies, because the guy acts like it's like, what are you talking, like, zombies, like, what do you, I'm out. It's like, isn't this a thing that you do like all the time for your YouTube channel?
I kind of
Um, yeah,
I see
Go
exactly
on.
what you're getting at, and I kind of like that they didn't go that way. That's always
Yeah.
that's like a cheap shot. I feel like it's the
Right.
obvious thing to do. Yeah, even though I guess not that obvious because I didn't really think about it offhand. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, I guess that's
Um. Yeah.
zombies,
Sorry.
Army of the
I'm still
Dead.
trying to find this movie, and I can't find it. So.
You will never
I.
find
I,
you will never
I, I
find this movie apparently.
yeah. I guess you got to give up on it. Um. I'll be sure. You know what? In the next week, I'm going to excessively search for it, and I'll bring it up next week.
Okay.
Um. Triumphantly. But we're out of Army of the Dead territory. How was your week?
How was my week? I played a lot of Mass Effect. I played a lot of Mass Effect. I
Have
beat
you
Mass
finished
Effect
it?
1. No, not even close. I'm in Mass Effect 2, which, by the way, what a good game. I was a little afraid, to be honest, because it's been a while since I've replayed Mass Effect 2. Maybe, 5, maybe longer, maybe like 7 years. Nah, it's probably like 5 years. Um, and I was a little afraid that I would, like there are always times with things, especially things that I've done to death. Like I have played through Mass Effect 2 maybe half a dozen times. I 100%ed it on the Xbox 360. That was one of my big things was when I had first moved to Los Angeles and I had no money, but I had the Xbox I bought in college. Is I sat in my apartment eating oatmeal because it was literally the cheapest thing I could possibly eat and I had no money, and I played Mass Effect through over and over again so I could get all of the different achievements, and I eventually ended up with everything except no. I eventually 100%ed it. Yeah, so I got all of the achievements done. And I'm always afraid when this kind of thing happens that like it'll lose its spark, right? But man, that game is just so good. It's so well written, and it does so many things right that I have just. One of the things that I really love about that game is the cinematography is amazing of just the dialogue scenes, right? Like not even cutscenes, right? But like where you're sitting and you're just watching the characters have a conversation and you're doing all this stuff with the dialogue wheel and you're doing like investigate further, tell me about this, tell me about that or whatever. Like it is so nice and refreshing to have just like really great cinematography in that compared to like the thing I am most the thing I'm comparing it to in my head is actually Fallout 4 for some reason, where you are just in first person and you're sitting there and you're having that direct conversation with the person, and it's just their face as they talk. Man, oh, I missed that. Anyway, I think Mass Effect 1 is also really great, and I spent most of my time this week 100%ing it. I did all of the side missions, and I cleared all of the assignments out of your whatever. I didn't actually get to max level. I only got to like level 28 out of 30 or something like that, but I did basically all of the game. It is funny how bad Mass Effect 1 is outside of its main campaign. Like the side missions are maybe some of the worst like open quote unquote open world content I've ever done in my life. And it makes sense because obviously in Mass Effect 2 they basically put all that stuff to the side and just really narrowed in on that story. But the story and the way the world introduces itself in Mass Effect 1 I found to be just so perfect. That I just got really sucked in. It's maybe the first game that really broke me out of my WoW addiction over the past 6 months, which is an addiction I've been trying to drop. I've been trying to kick the habit, which, by the way, I didn't kick. I obviously did a bunch of mythics and a bunch of other shit this week. But maybe
Of
the
course you
only
did.
game that I was like, whoa, I can't wait to get off work and play this that wasn't WoW was Mass Effect. So, yeah.
That, yeah, that's very cool. That's very excellent. I haven't played Mass Effect in a long time. I never played Mass Effect 3. Because I wanted to go back to Mass Effect 1 and beat it all the way. Because I had only ever beaten Mass Effect 2. And I was like, I'm going to go do the whole thing for Mass Effect 3, and then I never did. I got partway into Mass Effect 2 on that playthrough, and I was like, whatever. I gave up. So yeah, there's that. Um, Maybe I'll do it at some point just because it's a good game. Uh, I will give you that at least the second one's a good game.
Yep.
First one, first one I understood the criticisms about the Mako missions being not great,
They
but
have, to be honest, I do think they've done sort of like hashtag some changes to Mass Effect 1 to make it a little bit smoother. Cooldowns are a little bit lower. Like, so, one of the things that used to get locked out of really hard was your first aid cooldown, and they made the HUD better, so it was easier to kind of see your health and your, like where your health and your shields were at. And just some like small quality of life things. One of the things that is the best is you're kind of constantly filling your inventory. It's got like a lot of RPG stuff to it. You're constantly filling your inventory in Mass Effect 1, and they added a junk item feature where you can like select items and mark them as junk. And like sell them all in one go, which is like a modern thing. Like Dragon Age Inquisition will do that sort of thing. But I don't know. It was very welcome, I guess I would say.
yeah.
in
So
in this game.
how what do you think of like the Legendary Edition aspects of it? Like, are the improvements good, bad, whatever?
At least those gameplay improvements are very good. I have also had a good time with uh, uh, the DLCs being baked in. One of the things that happened to me when I played Mass Effect, when I played Mass Effect 2 the first time, um, so I had played Mass Effect but on a different Xbox, so I didn't have a Mass Effect save. So the first time I played Mass Effect 2, I used sort of like the default, like world state. That game was hard. Like, mostly because you don't have the DLC missions to sort of pad yourself out. You don't get extra characters right off the bat that give you. Some of those characters are really good. Specifically, Zaid in combat is like a fucking monster. And they unlock their loyalty missions right off the bat. So you can get right into the game, right into advanced training. There's a bunch of extra weapons. All that stuff just gives you like good options to sort of deal with what you're doing at, especially when you're playing at the higher difficulties. Um, but having all that stuff just baked in immediately was amazing. It was really nice, because I don't know. I felt like first of all I was making more interesting and complex choices about how I wanted to sort of build my character out, because I wasn't just it's not like I had there are in the base game two of each kind of gun, and then you can upgrade into a third version of a gun if you have sniper shotgun, sniper rifle, or assault rifle. Um, the thing that the DLC adds a bunch of extra guns in there that you can purchase that have different sort of like functionality. And I wouldn't say it's like imbalanced, right? But if you have a certain sort of playstyle, you can also kind of like find the gun for that playstyle. So for instance, the
Right.
Locust SMG is a very accurate submachine gun, and a big weakness of the class I'm playing is Infiltrator, which is like the sniper. It's like half combat, half tech sniper class. They can cloak themselves, and then their next shot, when they come out of that cloak, does a bunch of extra damage. So you cloak yourself, you use a sniper shot, it does like a billion damage, sort of thing. The base submachine guns in the game are really bad for that class because they're just like really fast firing, and they don't really like they're not very accurate at a distance. As Infiltrator, you're really trying to keep like keep far back, and you're like trying to snipe guys or whatever. The Locust is a very accurate submachine gun with like a low clip size, and the submachine guns are really good at tearing through shields, which is a weakness of the Infiltrator. So having the ability to say, okay, I have my sniper rifle when I need to like really like go hard on armor. I have my submachine gun to chew through someone's shield. Like that arsenal ability feels really nice to have. I guess is my thing.
That makes sense.
It is also making me
Um,
remember that Mass Effect Andromeda is a fucking masterpiece, and I'm so sad about that game. Because I constantly am remembering forward to having played Mass Effect Andromeda, and how the big thing that Andromeda adds is verticality. You get a jump jet, you get a little backpack, and people have different versions of it, right? Like the soldier is a true jump jet. You sploosh, you shoot high in the air, and then you sort of fall slowly. Whereas like the biotics will jump into the air but kind of hover for a second and stuff like that. So, yeah, in continued travesties of Mass Effect Andromeda having been memed to death on launch, I miss Mass Effect Andromeda. That's my point.
okay. Uh, Yeah. From like the graphics front, do you think the graphics like I posted a meme in one of our shared chats around the launch of Mass Effect Legendary Edition. It basically had it had Shepard doing like the big wide-eyed thing that like I recognize is from like a meme, and it's like a thing that was like a feat like that happened in the CryEngine. A thing that like I think was like similarly caused some of, like the memification of Andromeda, which is why I thought of it. Which you said was like not a problem like later in the game's life cycle. Did you think the graphics up stuff was fine?
I play on
Um,
a middling resolution monitor. I have 1440 monitors with a very high refresh rate, which is obviously good. Which plays. I remember the last time I played Mass Effect 2. I think I was playing on this monitor, and it didn't scale up very well. So I think on that sense, it's been fine. But otherwise, I haven't really like noticed too many improvements. Actually, that's not true. Mass Effect 1 has quite a lot of improvements, but like there was a real gulf between Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. Or sorry,
sure.
Mass Effect 1 and then 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are about the same, but Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 were like light years different. Um, just having things like textures on Shepard's armor. Like Shepard's armor has this thing where it sort of looks plastic in a way because it doesn't have any texturing, and they add that in Mass Effect 2. That's now there in Mass Effect 1. Some of like the faces and stuff like look better, but they're all using the same sort of like rigging and animations. One of the worst parts about it is that I think Mass Effect has some of the worst kind of like lip animations. Where it just doesn't look like it kind of looks like a bad old anime where the characters' lip movements aren't quite matching like what they're saying, but it's not so bad that I'm mad about it, and that's the kind of thing that I don't think that they would really be able to like quote unquote remaster, right? Like that would like require getting in there, re-rigging a whole
Yeah,
model
doing
to
motion
do.
capture or something.
Yeah, like all that kind of stuff is just like I don't know, rough.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Right. On my end, the big thing I did this week is I went to a real life movie theater and I saw Nobody with Bob Odenkirk.
Oh
Uh,
yeah! Wow, I forgot about that movie. Shit, is it out? I should go see it. Oh,
yeah,
are
I think
are
it's out on streaming even.
are movie theaters out in Los
My
Angeles?
my
Let's
in
check.
my region, in my part of the country, uh, you know, there are. I was like one of like three people in the theater too. So who knows how much longer they'll be open
Oh
for
my
before they
God,
all
they
close down
are. They
forever.
do exist. Wow.
Yeah. This is actually kind of funny. It's a Regal Cinema by me, and I'm a member of like the Unlimited Movies thing, but they didn't even have anybody checking tickets. I just kind of walked in and and so I wasn't. It's not a problem on my end. I like. There's a part of me that thinks like maybe they don't care, right? Like, you know, they only make their money on the concessions anyway, right? Just like hope that people buy stuff on their way in and throw their hands up. Um, but yeah. It also just might have been understaffed, whatever. But it was very. It's like a knockoff John Wick, and if you like John Wick, I think you will like this movie, but not as much as John Wick because I don't think it's nearly as good as John Wick.
You know what? Honestly, that's maybe fair because one of the things that's interesting, actually, and this kind of ties back to Army of the Dead, is I realized how much John Wick has influenced action filmmaking. I think I've made this point before, like we've talked about this before. But like, I remember in 2015, everybody thought that Mad Max Fury Road was the future of action movies, right? Like this was going to be the genre definer, and that turned out to be sort of an anomaly. The genre definer was a year before; it was John Wick, right? Like I have never seen as much reloading and even just the way people hold their guns now, right? Like think about how actors used to hold pistols versus now they do this, like the kids they're sort of trained to like aim down the sights and everything like that. And I just think that has really made a difference. Even for right, completely different director Zach Snyder, right? He was he was making a sort of John Wick clone ish in terms of the action filmmaking.
Yeah, no, and I think nobody doesn't quite get there either, right? It, like they also like kind of like I think it takes itself less seriously, which is a point in its favor, because it kind of like and this is another very shitposty thing, like the movie opens kind of like in media res, and then it like pops back to the beginning, and the opening part of the movie is him pulling out a can of like tuna fish and pulling a kitten out of his coat. I'm like, really? Like, are you going to be that obvious about it? And it's not really a big part of the movie at all. It's just kind of like a last minute thing that happens. It's like, oh, this is just this is just kind of like a winking at the camera type of deal. Um, but it's got a lot of like kind of like weird same stuff, like this kind of like weird like hidden world type part of it that you don't quite see. Um, Complete with like a Russian mobster bit. Um, and it's just like not as clean. It has some interesting stuff. Like the early fights are less smooth and like John Wick being a professional and more kind of like brutal. Like there's a fist fight in the beginning of the movie on a bus, and Bob Odenkirk gets like takes a few hits and then just like dishes them back out, and it's brutal, right? It's like a real like knockdown fight, and I was like, this is very different. It's not like a very fluid moving thing. It's just kind of like, like he takes like a punch to the face and falls over, and then stands back up and decks the guy in the face again, right? Like it's just kind of like very, very, very crunchy, I guess is the way to put it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's honestly
yeah.
sweet. I think Bob Odenkirk really does deserve it as like a guy who's been having
He deserves to be punched in the face.
no, I'm saying like I have like a
Yeah.
renaissance, because man, I just think he's a really good actor. I remember at the time people were really like wondering about. They were like, "Oh, can we do Better Call? Like, is Saul Goodman a complicated enough character to make like this spin-off show about or whatever?" And I don't want to be like I always knew it would be amazing. But I remember thinking that if anything, Bob Odenkirk is a very good actor, and I bet I think that he can support it. I think that he can really support like his own, not necessarily like Saul the character, but just Bob Odenkirk is a guy that you can put as the protagonist of a TV show and he will kill it. Which ended up being the truth because Better Call Saul is the best show on TV. Honestly, I really want to watch Better Call Saul again because I've been watching Boston Legal. Do you know that show?
Yeah, so my mom used to watch that show, and I would come down and like from my room and like see it on TV and like sit and watch episodes with her occasionally. Apparently, it's like a very bad show from like the legal perspective. This was before I was kind of like into like law as like a hobby.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. It is maybe one of the worst. I mean, it's funny because it's by a guy that did a bunch of these lawyer shows. David E. Kelly. He did. Ally McBeal is the other lawyer show that he did, um, which I always think of as single female lawyer from
yeah.
Futurama. But anyway, the Boston
So
Legal
William
is
Shatner
yeah,
and who's the other actor?
James
Is it
Spader.
okay? Yeah, because he's Ultron, right?
And then also, honestly, my favorite maybe in this is Rene Auberjonois or something is his name. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Oh, Odo
Yeah, from Star Trek. Yeah, he is in it
and
as like the
Inspector.
very stuffy kind of lawful neutral, like chastising. The
So
conceit of the
Odo.
show is
Wait,
he.
does he really just play Odo again? That's awesome. I need Rene Auberjonois, or do something like that. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
basically his character in Star Trek DS9 as well, which is
so
awesome.
the show so Boston Legal is sort of predicated on it's this law firm, right, and it's this ensemble cast, right, but it's really predicated on two characters: Denny Crane, who is William Shatner, who is this like legendary lawyer. Everybody knows him. He just says his name all the time. He's like Denny Crane, and people like get it, and it's like a thing. And then also James Spader as Alan Shore, and they are simultaneously like very moral people, but like willing to sort of like break the rules in order to get their way, right? So like for instance, something that comes up is their client. They're prepping their client for testimony. Their client reveals that they did something illegal, and Alan Shore is like, "I'm gonna put her on the witness stand, and he's like, I want you to whistleblow. And she's like, no. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to put you on the stand. And under oath, I'm going to ask you these questions because it is the right thing to do to expose, whatever, like my shitty client's like drug company or whatever. Like this is sort of the conflict of the episode. And then you have Rene Auberjonois who comes in and he's like, well, we have a duty to our client. You could get disbarred. And he's like, but think of all the people that this scummy drug company we represent fucked over or whatever. Anyway, and so they're like, you can't ask the witness the questions. You are going to be second chair, and the other lawyer is going to ask the questions. So like Alan Shore sneaks a knife on, like he puts a switchblade in his co-attorney's pocket, so that as they're walking into the courthouse, he gets beeped at the metal detector, and like, so that kind of stuff, right? Like, doing the kind of chaotic good, I'm gonna do the right thing even in the wrong, like even in the wrong way, which is very opposed by, Rene Abdul is not a bad guy in the show. He just has the interest of like the firm at heart. And so that's the character he plays. He just plays the guy who is going to constantly like, you know, the rules you. But yeah, it is probably
Uh,
the worst legal show I could think of. The only reason I know this is because I've obviously watched a bunch of Legal Eagle, where he criticizes certain shows for like legal realism, and this show is full of not legal realism. Mostly, but I find the most common thing that people fuck up is how lawyers interact with witnesses on the witness stand. Because like you're only supposed to ask questions, you're not supposed to ask leading questions, obviously. And there are just constantly times where these lawyers will like turn to the jury and go, "Did you hear that?" On the witness stand, they said that they're bad. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, which was like you would never do.
yeah, I mean the most famous example of this is probably what is it?
A few good men.
Yeah, if you could, you can't handle the truth. Like
Mm-hmm.
that whole scene is like not a thing that happens ever, right? Like,
Which is funny because that is based on a real case. Like that is a dramatization of a real thing that happened. It's just the finale of it is completely different.
yeah, no, I mean, there's and like and this I might have even seen this on Legal Legal myself, but I think like it could happen, but no lawyer that's like halfway competent would be like as soon as it started, be like, no, nope, this is over. No one's talking, right? Like
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
let
The defense attorney would object, and the judge would immediately sustain it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because like it doesn't. Yeah, no, and the yeah, but yeah, that's neat because, or rather, just go back to the Boston Legal thing, right? Like that is basically his entire character in DS9. It's a little bit different because he's like the sheriff of DS9, and he's
Okay.
got his own problems, but like he's very lawful neutral, um, especially when he's playing a secondary role. DS9 is great, by the way.
I
It's the
I
only
have
Star Trek I've
never
watched all
done
the way through.
anything Star Trek TV show I guess related. Like I've seen a handful of like a smattering of individual episodes, but I've never actually like gone deep on Star Trek. So
I feel like that's a thing for us to do at some point.
yeah, that is definitely,
Is a
man. If
Star
we
Trek
ever
watch
get
through.
if we ever get low on content, uh, Star Trek deep dive is on the list.
Starting with the animated series, because that's the most important one. But no, I actually do want to go watch the original series, and then TNG, just because like I watch enough like Star Trek adjacent media, and I really like DS9. DS9's like very popular in this kind of like era because it's the less idealistic version of Star Trek without going like full like dystopia, which some of the modern Trek's been accused of, right? Like the like Discovery and Picard get wrapped for like you know TNG almost like fails because like Gene Roddenberry's still alive, and it's like there is never any conflict on the ship. This is a hard rule, and like this like just makes for spectacularly boring television. Um, because like Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was kind of like the this utopic future where everybody gets along and everything's great, and all the challenges come from the outside. DS9 is like overlaps the last few seasons of DS9, or the first few seasons of DS9 and the last few seasons of TNG overlap a little bit. Um, and and it's kind of like the dark side of the Federation, um, in a way that just doesn't happen in TNG that
Yeah, I
I
mean,
found.
I brought him up earlier in the episode, but J. Michael Straczynski wrote. I mean, he show ran and wrote almost all of Babylon 5, and DS9 was sort of like a not a like rival, but a like the Star
The
Trek
same
version of
cohort.
yeah, it was like the Star Trek version of Babylon 5, right?
I've never watched Babylon 5. I have not watched a lot of the classic
Okay.
nerd television
Yeah, I,
shows.
I have never watched Babylon 5 either. All I know is that Babylon 5 has that reputation of like very complex interpersonal relationships, like political stuff happening on this space station, and that DS9 is the Star Trek sort of, like I don't want to say it's derivative or like fan fiction, but it's just the Star Trek version of that model, right? Of that kind of like story of that story premise, which
Yeah, I
I've
mean that
always
makes sense.
always felt
DS9,
was great.
DS9 is a space station. It's not a ship,
Yeah.
and and it's also got it's got conflict from the beginning because it's a space station that the Federation owns, but was originally a Bajoran space station, but that was taken over by the Cardassians, who were kind of like the villains. When they took over, kind of like basically it was like where they oppressed the Bajorans from. Um, and the Cardassians been beaten back to Cardassia, and now like the Bajorans are allied with the Federation, and so the Federation runs the station, but there's still this kind of like tension over the peace, over like the Bajorans being vaguely, like vengeful, and like who's on the station. It's I don't know. I like it a lot. And
I honestly love all these
I would
shows. Like,
recommend it to
man,
people.
I went so apeshit for Battlestar Galactica when the sci-fi original Battlestar Galactica show was out. Do you remember that show?
Uh,
That would also be a good classic sci-fi TV show.
isn't Battlestar Galactica the one that had like a run in the '70s that no one cares
Yeah, so
about?
Battlestar Galactica had a run in the 70s with the Cylons, but like the Cylons were so influential, I guess, like just people remembered the Cylons, that they made an updated version in 2004 that was originally just a mini series, but the mini series ended up being a backdoor pilot for a real series. Because like the series, the idea of Battlestar Galactica is the robots blow up the like all of the human colonies, and there's one warship that's like a battleship called the Battlestar.
Those-
The Battlestar Galactica, which is like a decommissioned warship, kind of like the USS Enterprise, or I'm sorry, Intrepid. It's Intrepid in New York Harbor, right? Or
I think
like
so.
like the USS like Indianapolis, or the Arizona, one of the ones. There's like one of the ones in Pearl Harbor, right? That's like a World War II era battleship that is decommissioned and is like a museum. The Battlestar Galactica is basically that, but the Cylons attack and they nuke all of these places, and the Battlestar Galactica is the only like warship left, and there's this giant migrant fleet of people who are like trying to go from wherever to like the mythical homeland of Earth where humans came from or whatever. And Battlestar Galactica had 4 or 5 seasons. Where the main conceit was the Cylons could look like humans. In the miniseries, you find out that the Cylons have the ability to look exactly like humans do, and it has all this like what is human subtext going on. And I don't want to say it's like great, like it is not the best,
It famously shits the bed in the last season, right?
to be honest, I like the conclusion of the series, and I think the conclusion of the series is good and fine. But there are like, it's more problematic pieces throughout, is what I would say. Than it's kind of got like the J.J. Abrams problem of like, you know, um,
You didn't
wrapping.
write out the conclusion.
Yeah. And so like there's a lot of stuff kind of in the middle that is sort of like left unresolved. And I like the conclusion of the show. I think it like works, but it works in kind of like a lukewarm way where you it is a it's the best like it's the best you can do. You just kind of have to make your peace with it. It's never going to be amazing and perfect. But there's a lot of stuff in the middle that is just like, "Oh, so good." Like just these plot twists that happen and developments that are really interesting and I don't know, man, that show's great. I was like obsessed with that show for like, what it was? It was one intercession. Right when the show ended, it was an intercession, and I just spent 3 weeks in my dorm room, like eating Southwest chickens and watching Battlestar Galactica end to end. That's it. That was my whole intercession.
Sounds about right. One of those I just watched like most of Seinfeld, which is another series that like in the last episode it shits the bed.
Oh,
So
really?
um, the finale of Seinfeld is like famously panned. Um,
Wow, I actually did not know
again,
that.
first of all, bad legal show, right? Like, and then it's a clip show, right? Like it's
Wow, that's bad.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have watched some of Seinfeld. I watched like the first 2 or 3 seasons of Seinfeld when it came to Hulu for $1 million for like an exorbitant amount of money. I remember Seinfeld famously ended just because Jerry Seinfeld abruptly basically was like, the show is ending, it is over now, like, and then never really went on to do anything else of note. I guess I don't know what that was
Yeah,
about,
comedians in
Jerry.
cars getting coffee.
Yeah, I guess so. B movie, meme classic,
Yeah,
right?
B movie. Yeah, yeah.
I was something I've been
Um,
getting into recently is YouTubers in like the right now it's called Clone Hero, which is like the successor to Guitar Hero, because Activision doesn't really do Guitar Hero games anymore, but people basically like made another version of Guitar Hero called Clone Hero, but that is like very user driven, right? So people write their own charts for the
oh,
songs and
people
everything.
don't play Frets on Fire anymore. Frets
Um,
on Fire was the big open source one for a while.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, now it's all Clone Hero, and there's a big Clone Hero YouTuber called Asai, and he's famous because he's just really good at the game. So he's getting like FCs all the time. Do you know what an FC is? A full combo.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that
in
makes
a
sense.
rhythm game, an FC, just for everybody out there, is when an FC is when you hit every note in a song, right? You're going through the song and you hit every possible note. You never drop a note. And you also technically like never over fret, I think, is another thing where like you never hit a note that isn't there. And Asai is just like an extremely talented player of Clone Hero, Guitar Hero. He has a bunch of very cool FCs. Like one of the things about the Guitar Hero sort of like scene is that people are always trying to like devise like impossible songs. So there's one guy, I think his name is like Endmeyer or something, but he has this series called the Soulless series, which are like 17-minute songs that are so technically complex that just like people are constantly fucking up. There's actually a whole subgenre by another YouTuber that is specifically about score progressions for really hard, songs like the Soulless series. But anyway, Asai has quite an eye for the memes, and somebody made a chart for the entirety of B movie that is an hour and a half long, but for Guitar Hero, where you are playing Guitar Hero for B movie, and he played it, which I thought was hilarious. Actually, I don't know that he played it. I saw a YouTube thing for it, but I didn't actually watch the YouTube video, so maybe I'm lying. Maybe he didn't actually play it, but I saw the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Anyway, I don't know
I,
that.
I do have to say, like the past minute of you talking about this reminded me of that like Prosy D video that's like about like the water enthusiast. Or it's like I call
Yeah,
these a
yeah, yeah.
roundy. Right?
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, that's good
yeah.
shit. Honestly, it's
But
really made me want to get Clone Hero just so I can. Man, I really loved playing, Guitar Hero when it was out. Like that was such an amazing game.
it was okay. I don't know. I'm a DDR boy in my heart,
Fair enough.
and the Guitar Hero Rock Band thing kind of like killed the like or dominated the rhythm action space for a long time.
Yeah, that is
Um,
that is very fair. I remember people were really hype about DDR when I was in high school because Guitar Hero came out when we were in high school, um,
yeah.
and and I remember it being a thing. People doing like DDR. We would have in the lunchroom or whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's about all we have time for, I think, unless you want to talk about something else.
I have nothing else to talk about, I guess. So
Yeah, all right. Well, if you'd like to email us about what you thought about Army of the Dead, or if you have the name of that movie that we can't think of, email us at somedirtsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@somedirtsplaygames.com. Follow us at twitch.tv/dirtsplaygames where you can see these live. Watch these on YouTube if you want. Did I forget to upload the last YouTube one? I probably did. And what else? You can donate to us on Patreon, rate, review us on iTunes, all that good stuff. Um, that's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything else you want to promote?
I have nothing else that I'm looking to promote.
In that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.